Lesson plan reflection. The alignment of my learning goal and the learning objective was to be able to identify the main idea of the chapter. And why I chose this learning objective and goal for my segment is because 3 out of the 5 students had IEP objectives relating to finding the central idea or main idea of the text. When coming up with these objectives, I had to consider what would the condition be, who are the learners, what's learning behavior, what's the evaluation of criteria. So here's what my learning objective is that given a prompt, so my prompt is in chapter 7, blank. So the student should be able to tell me what happened in chapter 7 or chapter 8 or in the last 3 chapters. So that's my condition. The students are my learners. Then they will be able to identify, and then for my learning objective was for the whole class of 3 out of the 5 students would be able to identify the main idea. So at the end of my lessons, my students should have been able to say, now I'm able to identify the main idea, or to be able to summarize the main idea. I also wanted to align this with a 9th grade standard. Some of the students are not at grade level, but they are in 9th grade, so they should be held to the same state standards as everybody else. And one of the state standards is to identify that central idea. So that's another reason why I chose this learning objective. Knowledge of my students. So I know that this class has a variety of abilities, so I wanted to be able to teach to that. I wanted my students to understand the main idea and summarizing in their own words and how that was important, and how to find those key details with the study guide and how that plays into finding the main idea. Each day I asked the students what the main idea was, because I wanted that generalization of main idea, because it's for all reading. It's not just for English class. You have to be able to identify the main idea. So I kind of took that into consideration as a need for my students, and that this need has been identified through a team of people as well. I also took into fact the ways they can answer, and I played on those strengths. So if the student, I knew some of the students like to write on the smartboard, and I knew that some students like to write on individual whiteboards, and some students just like to answer out loud. So I taught to that. So one day I'm going to have them write on the whiteboard, and one day I'm going to have them write on the smartboard, and then the other days I'm going to have them just verbally say their answers before we put them in their study guide. I also took into fact the students that I know were really good at responding, and I kind of called on them a little bit more to help prompt some of my students that aren't as involved. There's a student in the class that has social anxiety, and he doesn't respond when he's called on. When I was also planning for this lesson, the knowledge of my students and some of the needs that I knew that were going to happen is one of my students just got out of the hospital. Yeah. So I knew that she probably didn't know the story, and that I needed to take into consideration how to teach her what was going on prior to this chapter, because I knew she was going to come in at like lesson 2. So when preparing my lessons, I had to think about the different factors that each of my students were dealing with their needs. And then I also wanted to help out with those strengths and how can I get those responses. So the support. So I'm going to provide support to my students by starting off the first day with a lot more support. I'm going to guide them more than what I will on the 3rd day. And I'm going to provide the support as needed and as it's happening during my class. So if the student isn't identifying the main idea, or the students are understanding how to identify the main idea, we'll come up with the main idea as a class. And then by the 3rd day, hopefully they're being able to summarize all 3 chapters and the chapter's main ideas.